sit back. Okay. So Revelation, of course, is where we are. Revelation chapter 7. Pretty certain that's where we are. And so tonight we're going to do, yes, all the way from 13 through to 16, but not 17. We'll leave that for next week. So starting at verse 13, I shall read out to you. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes? And whence came they? And I said to him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. And they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. So, the two questions that are asked here, which I'll just put in contemporary English. Who are these dressed in white robes, and where have they come from? That's basically what he's asking in this vision. And it's an elder, one of the 24 elders, who says that in the vision to the Apostle John. And John says, Thou knowest. In other words, you know. I don't know who they are, but you know. And the answer is, these are they which came out of great tribulation. Now, if you've got what would you call it, a contemporary or a modern translation of the Bible, it will probably say, these are they which came out of the Great Tribulation. Whereas older versions, like the King James Version that I'm using here, like the Matthew's Bible, the Geneva Bible, all those older Bibles miss out the, so it just says Great Tribulation. Why? I imagine it's probably a difference between the manuscripts. Without going into all the technical details, there'll be a manuscript difference. Does it really make any kind of difference? It might do. So let me give you a sort of anecdotal answer to that. So in China in the 1940s, there were a lot of missionaries, Western missionaries, that went to China and shared the gospel and so on. And many of those missionaries were what we call, they believed in a pre-tribulation rapture. Now what that means is, normally quite often we call them dispensationalists. It's just a kind of branch of doctrine in the Christian church, okay? And what the pre-tribulation rapture is, put simply, these are Christians who believe that in the future there was going to be a great time of testing for the church, the Great Tribulation, and that all the Christians would be raptured before that happened. Raptured in the sense they mean it is that Jesus would come along and all the Christians would just go up to heaven and they would miss it. Okay, and so that was what they taught. And what happened in the 1940s in China was the communists came to power in, I think, 1949 or something like that, and Christians started to suffer persecution. Well, what happened was the Christians said, well, we haven't been raptured. Why are we suffering this persecution? So this can't be the Great Tribulation then. And so what actually happened was, I believe, I heard a preacher talking about it, he was saying a lot of them actually lost their faith because they thought, well, either we're not Christians and this is the Great Tribulation, or this isn't the Great Tribulation and something worse is coming. And they're saying, well, we can't even handle this, it's so bad. So what's the Great Tribulation going to be like? And they lost heart, you know. And so isn't it interesting? That can be the difference. I know it's anecdotal, but between the Great Tribulation or just Great Tribulation in general. So I prefer to go with, there are other reasons, but I prefer to go with Great Tribulation, because I don't think then it's pointing to something in the future, something that's going to take place that hasn't happened yet, and I don't think it's pointing to something that's worse than Christians at this time, as we were looking at the time of the early churches, is going through. You know, it was pretty bad what they went through then. So I don't think there is going to be a worse time for that. Some people try and link it into Matthew 24, where again it talks about tribulation. I think that is probably talking more about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, where the Romans came in and they basically destroyed the temple and destroyed the kind of early Jewish belief, which was built around sacrifices in the temple. They destroyed the temple. We even know that they ploughed up the foundations of the temple, and Josephus, I think it is, even records the name of the guy who did the ploughing of the foundation. So it was completely removed. It's a fulfillment of what Jesus says. He says, you know, there'll come a time where one stone will not be left upon another of this huge and impressive temple. So I think here the Great Tribulation, the great time of trouble, is not but is just Christians who've gone through Great Tribulation, whatever that is. And so see in the letters to the 7 churches where Jesus talks about there'll be times of testing, you know, where, you know, you'll need to try and come through that, times of extraordinary testing, and if you don't fail, if you triumph, then this, I believe, are these people who are being described. They're dressed in white. They've washed their robes, that is from all guilt, and they're made white in holiness and in the blood of the Lamb. So, of course, Christ is the Lamb. The blood of Christ not only makes us clean, but it adorns us. It kind of, if you've been through that time of tribulation and you've come out, you know, you're kind of wearing the blood of Christ as a sign, as a symbol that he's brought me through this. You know, the Lamb has brought me through. And I don't think this is so much a picture of Christian martyrs. We've talked about martyrs before. That's kind of been used earlier on, but rather just those who've kept the course, if you like, through in times of intense difficulty and suffering. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there's no guarantee that even genuine Christians will complete the race. It's not a foregone conclusion. It's not like, well, I'm saved now, I've got my ticket to heaven. You know, no, there could come times of testing, and in fact the Apostle Paul warns us about those concerning their faith have made shipwreck in 1 Timothy 1:19. So he's saying, you know, they had this faith, but they've made it like a shipwreck. You know, it's like it's wrecked. You can't put it back together again. We read about a guy called Demas in 2 Timothy 4:10. Paul says, Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. So this is even one of Paul's helpers who's going out with him on these missionary journeys, sharing the gospel and so on. Mm-hmm. And Paul's saying, this guy, he's fallen in love with the world, with worldly things, and therefore he's left and he's abandoned me. So it certainly can happen. But, you know, Christians do go through times of tribulation. And let's have a look at one of those, the example that Paul gives in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 9. Yeah, so this is what Paul is saying about himself. He says, verse 27, but I keep under my body and I bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Or the word can mean reprobate. He's saying, even me, if I've preached to other people and brought people to Christ, I have to keep my body in subjection. I have to make sure that my flesh doesn't kind of have the upper hand, that I don't succumb to the temptations of my flesh, because even I could be a castaway. I could be reprobate, and that's what the word means. You've got to, if you've got a Greek, a Koine Greek to English dictionary, look the word up. Have a look at it. There's no doubt that that's what Paul's saying. He's saying, even me, an apostle of Christ, who's preached to all these people and seen all these people saved and written, such a large part of the New Testament as well. It's like he's saying even I could be a reprobate. I could be cast away if I don't keep my body under control, if I don't keep my flesh under control. So the people that we see here, those who are dressed in white, these are those who have not made shipwreck of the faith. They've not left the gospel behind. They've not fallen in love with the things of the world, and the result of doing that, or of not doing that, is verse 15. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. So this is kind of like their reward. Well, that's verse 15. Therefore, I've said before, when you see the word therefore, we ask, well, what is it there for? It's a connecting word. It's connecting the previous passage, and so this is what it's about. It's therefore. These are those who have not done all those things, and it talks, doesn't it, about hunger and thirsting and tears. Those Christians who have suffered for being Christians, for proclaiming Christ. And here it's saying, verse 16, they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. So these are those Christians who have suffered the denial of food, of drink. They've had to live in these kind of circumstances because of Christ. Not just because of the country you live in, or but because they proclaimed Christ, they suffered these persecutions and hardships. And if we look at 2 Corinthians 11. And this is just a little snapshot, really, into Paul's life. And he's not boasting here; he's just telling it like it is. So, verse 23 of 2 Corinthians 11, sort of part way through, he says, "In labours more abundant, in stripes," that's like wounds, "above measure, in prisons more frequent, in deaths often," in peril of death, "of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes save one." So he's saying, I had 39 lashes from the Jews 5 times. 5 times they whipped me, 39 times each. "Thrice, 3 times, was I beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day have I been in the deep," or on the sea. "In journeyings often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness, besides those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is offended and I burn not? So he's saying, all these things have happened to me. I've been whipped, I've been beaten with rods, I've been stoned, I've been shipwrecked, I've gone through all this. And you're telling me that that's not a great tribulation? I think it is. I can't see how it'd be much worse than what he's experiencing here. And he says, not only that, but I've got the care of all these other churches, because he's an apostle. It's not just got one church, it's got all these churches, all these young Christian fellowships that are sprouting up, that he's got to go and correct false doctrine and bring discipline and bring encouragement. And like his journeys, his missionary journeys we call them, he's like, I'm shipwrecked, I'm beaten, I'm persecuted, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I've got no clothes. And that's his experience. He's not complaining, but he's saying this is my life. So yes, Christians all around the world suffer for Christ, and it's who are these who are dressed in white? It's those guys and men and women who've suffered that, and God is going to reward them. And it says, and there'll be no sun to light on them, meaning no painful heat, because they're in the ocean, and all day it's like with the sun beating down. That's the idea. It's like, no, that's not going to happen now, and they'll serve God day and night in his temple. Well, there won't be any temple anymore. It's a figurative way of speaking about heaven, and the picture or the imagery that's being used here is of the priests who used to serve God in the tabernacle and in the temple day and night. It's like they're going to have a place of honour, because they could have given up. They were tempted to give up, no doubt, many times. It would have been easier for them to just say, right, it's too much, it's too difficult, this. But they didn't. And God is going to reward those who stood the test, who've given their soul, their life, their all, during times of fierce tribulation. And now they will enjoy that close fellowship with God. And notice that the reward is not gold or silver or fleshly pleasures. It's what? It's close fellowship with God. Something of no interest to kind of nominal Christians, but for those who've been through all this, who've suffered in this way for Christ, the only thing they really desire is that close fellowship with God. And that is, they can't think of a greater, a better reward than to serve God day and night and be that, as closer than the angels, really, I think is what it's saying. You'll be as close to God for that, because this is no interest to those who value carnality, fleshly things, but it is riches indeed to those who've given their all, to the living God. So that's what I think, that's who these guys are.